have Astrid NARANJO on with us. So if you're on Instagram, some of you probably know her as the anti-diet dietitian. So she is a dietitian and she focuses a lot working with people that have disordered eating and bad eating behaviors. If you have her on Instagram, you'll see that she puts up a lot of content, busting a lot of myths and pushing a lot of science, which we love. So welcome and thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for having me.
No worries. You just want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you became a dietitian?
Yeah, sure. So I've been a dietitian for about 8 years and a half. And basically, when I started, I did a bachelor's degree for 5 years back home in South America. Then I did a little bit of private practice and workshops, a lot of education in the fitness industry. And then I moved to Australia, did my master's degree, and I specialized a lot in the clinical aspect of nutrition, but also in the research aspect. So I've been doing a little bit of both. And in addition to that, once I finished my master's degree, I got straight away into the private health practice and working with in a hospital as a dietitian and as a clinical dietitian. And on the side to that, I've been doing my online nutrition coaching. So I do a little bit of both things at the same time. And recently, in the past 4 months, I started working with a Clean Health Fitness Institute here in Australia, which pretty much is focused on building evidence-based coaches in the fitness industry. So I'm doing a little bit of marketing and working in the research and product development. So I do that as well. So
yeah, lots.
My head
busy.
Few different hats, but loving it.
They've actually got a really good Instagram feed. I was actually having a look at their page, the Clean Health, and they've got a lot of great people on there and a lot of really good content, and the graphics look amazing. So I don't know if you had anything to do with that, but their feed is really, really good.
I've collaborated in different posts. Obviously, the art is done by graphic designers, but like the actual copy or like the blogs, I have contributed with some of that as well.
Oh, that's amazing. So what sort of clients do you work the most with? I know if you're in hospitals, you're probably dealing with a bit of chronic illness outside of just the sports sort of thing. So what's your sort of client demographic made up out of?
Well, it's a little bit like if we focus just in my online coaching, generally I have clients focusing on building their relationship with food, trying to be focused on improving what they currently thinking that is like an obsession about food, thinking about food a lot. So I really work with them with intuitive eating or mindful eating. Sometimes it's just a combination of strategies that aligns better with the client. I just have a combination of different type of clients. So just like a few months ago, I had a client that was working with me with like trying to reduce binge eating, improving her relationship with food. And she got to a point where she was actually so well and in a much better place that she was actually able to compete in a bodybuilding show.
Oh, so, wow.
It was amazing how the transformation of her mindset actually led her to a better place where she was able to approach that contest prep in a really well headspace. She wasn't struggling with her this all or nothing mindset, and now she finished the show. She's in a really good place to sort of know where she's heading, and we're doing a slow reverse for her, so she's not sort of heading straight into eating back to normal. So again, it's like so much variety in terms of my online clients. Now in the hospital, most of the times I see most elderly or chronic management, chronic disease management, diabetes, malnutrition. So it's completely the opposite.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, I do have mental health patients. So the hospital where I work is rehab and mental health. So the mental health aspect, I do a lot of like emotional eating workshops, mindful eating, trying to build back the relationship with food as well, teaching that carbs are not the enemy.
Yeah.
Lots of different things that actually seems to be pretty dumb, but when you actually see them in the real life, it is a big deal for a lot of people. So
It is.
I see,
Yeah.
I see myself doing this all the time, and I actually enjoy it. I feel like it is my main need to communicate, and so my mission.
Yeah,
If
I
you
love
say.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you've got a really good feed, and a lot of the messages that you're putting out there, I really resonate with. It's similar sorts of things as what we sort of try and push, is sort of changing that thinking from demonizing foods and demonizing carbs, and that food's the enemy and that there's bad foods, rather than just pushing like a science-based approach and looking at food as what it is. So no, I think that the stuff you're putting out there is really good, which is what I guess sort of sparks me to ask you to come on today. Is I really enjoyed the posts that you were putting up about soft drinks and artificial sweeteners, because I think that is something we get asked a lot, and I think there's definitely a lot of misinformation out there. You talk to some people and they'll say artificial sweeteners are the enemy, they're terrible, you're better off just having real sugar. Other people saying the opposite. So it'd be good to just sort of talk through that so people that are listening can actually get a little bit more facts. So if you want to sort of lead the way and just explain a little bit about artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, sure. And I think the artificial sweeteners are going to lead very, very nicely into soft drinks and diet drinks and things like that. So let me just define what artificial sweeteners are. And these are pretty much like sugar substitutes. And basically people fear about them because they are also chemicals. Like everything that is in food is chemicals as well. So this is added to foods and beverages as a replace to natural sugars or added sugars to maintain the sweetness and the flavor of these foods. So generally, these sweeteners are quite intense, so they can signal to your body and your taste buds that this is something sweet you're tasting. So you can actually taste it, and your tongue can connect and tell your brain that you're actually having something sweet. So most of them are very low calories or no calories at all. And some of those, you can partially digest them and extract some calories out of them. Okay. So yeah, so artificial sweeteners obviously are often in a quite heated debate. And on the one hand, they claim that they will increase your risk of cancer, harm your blood sugar levels, your gut health, give you Alzheimer, a lot of different things that you can hear about that. And on the other hand, you can see that there is a quite of growing evidence that is supporting the fact that artificial sweeteners are not for harm and are safe, and they are actually a really good tool for weight loss management for diabetes patients. So there is these two camps where you get, as you mentioned before, there is a lot of misinformation, and this tends to gravitate a lot just because the majority of previous studies, that especially the earliest studies, came out sort of against artificial sweeteners were mostly observational. And we know that observational studies are just observing what happens with people like consuming certain things, but there is no control groups, there is no follow-up, it is very low grade of evidence to put it in the easiest terms. So when you look at what the highest level of evidence is, you want to look at randomized controlled trials and systematic reviews, which are sort of the biggest type of evidence that you can find, because they can be more objective and much less biased, and they generally can have a control group and a group that is actually following an intervention that you want to prove your hypothesis or your ideas. So recently there has been quite a few studies, especially systematic reviews, sort of looking into aspartame or sucralose or this type of artificial sweeteners that tend to be quite debated, but they're also the most common ones that we see in different products. And that tends to be the most used and favorite by people. So that's what artificial sweeteners tend to sort of this controversial aspect of artificial sweeteners. Do you have any follow-up questions about that before I continue?
So I guess when you're saying, like, just for people listening, when you're talking, sort of explaining the studies, so the earlier ones was just they sort of observed people that were, say, consuming the product, but they weren't actually taking into account their lifestyle, like all of these other factors that may have been causing a certain result. It's just like a maybe it could be attributed to this, maybe not. Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Same happens with other things, like people that consume meat. Then meat is bad because it is correlated with heart disease. But what are you just saying that meat correlates with cancer and heart disease? But how about looking at the whole lifestyle of the person that is getting the heart disease, the actual
so it might
problem?
be that people that eat meat, they also don't exercise, they also might have a family history, and then they get the heart disease. So it's not specifically because of the meat, it's an array, like a whole heap of factors that all sort of come in together. Yeah, I got you.
Exactly.
Okay, well, that's good, I guess, that they're sort of actually doing more controlled studies on it now.
Exactly. And I actually read a systematic review on sucralose, which is one of the artificial sweeteners I will speak later on, that they were looking at how related to having effects on your insulin levels, like if you consume this particular artificial sweetener, would have an effect on your blood glucose and your insulin levels, because that's one of the claims that tends to be quite often seen, that if you consume artificial sweeteners, you're going to have a negative response in your insulin levels and your blood glucose levels, because even though it's a fake signal, or you're not actually consuming sugar, you sort of telling your brain that you're consuming something that is not being absorbed, but so your body becomes confused and increases insulin.
So then it goes the other way, so crashes your blood sugar. So because I have heard that as well, that if you have artificial sweeteners, it spikes your it spikes your insulin because your body thinks that you've got higher blood sugar, but because you haven't actually had sugar and your body's produced the insulin to counter it because it's not actually there, it crashes it. Yeah, I've heard that as well.
Yeah, and I would say you might see quite a large different responses. We have people that are non-respondents and people that are respondents. So some people, if their background or their history has never been someone who ate or consumed very often artificial sweeteners, and they having that for the first time, you might see, and that's some studies that have shown that some people might find a slight elevation of insulin blood glucose, but that's just because it's like a first exposure, or they are just more likely to be this type of responders, whereas other people haven't shown any signs that insulin was elevated as a response to consuming something with sucralose or aspartame or any other artificial sweetener.
So for a lot of people, you can consume say like diet soft drinks or like sugar-free versions with the artificial sweeteners, and you can actually consume it without actually having to spike your insulin.
Most of the people, like 99% of the population, will be that sort of non-respondent.
Okay.
So that means you won't have a negative effect or insulin spikes or blood glucose levels going up, just because the actual artificial sweetener is not being absorbed. So generally, for the most part, it is broken down in a way that you either you can't absorb it at all, so it just passes through your to your feces, or part of some artificial sweeteners can be absorbed, but the chemical structure signs your liver that is not something that you will utilize for energy. So it's not a carbohydrate, it's not a protein, it's not fat. So you can sort of clean it up and excrete it via your urine. So that's the way it is metabolized. So you either excrete it via urine, or you sort of excrete it through your feces. But generally, for the most part, you won't have a direct effect on, like, it is not going to be either a conversion to carbohydrates or to protein or anything like that.
So basically, you do consume it, it tastes like sugar, it's sweet, but your body knows that it's not, so it just gets rid of it, basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I would say that you could easily think that only a minority of artificial sweeteners will have a structure that will break down into potential calories. Okay. And some of those are like a small amount of artificial sweeteners that they not purely that particular artificial sweetener. For example, when we think about Splenda or Equal, you look at the combination and the ingredients, and they not just purely aspartame or just purely sucralose. Why? Because it is a very strong and intense sweetener. And if we were to put it in a sachet by themselves, it could taste too very, very sweet, and the experience wouldn't be very pleasant. So that's why you see that these artificial sweeteners tend to provide 1 gram of carbohydrates. Why? Because it's that combination of a part of it will be the aspartame, the actual molecule of aspartame or sucralose, but you also will have a little bit of dextrine or dextrose. So you have a little bit of actual sugar, and the other half will be the artificial sweetener. So at the end of the day, it's still very, very low in calories, and that's what the advantage is.
So I was going to say, talking about the benefits of obviously having the artificial sweeteners, primarily just calorie saving, really.
Yeah, I think if you look at it for the aspect of the calories, they are quite a good tool for people that are trying to maintain their weight management, to be more specific, or to aid a lifestyle that is a little bit healthier, because you don't have necessarily to displace the rest of your calories to adequate or accommodate for sugar, just because you're now not having any sugar at all, and those extra calories you can allocate them to things that are more nutritious.
No, that makes sense. It definitely does. Like, I know, especially if I'm prepping or I'm in a dieting phase, having sugar-free soft drinks is something that does make dieting feel a lot easier, because you still are getting, I guess, the sweetness, which you tend to crave when you're dieting, and I guess you don't feel like you're missing out so much and just limited to pretty much water. So it is definitely a good addition.
I would add to that is that mindset and the sort of emotional aspect to it, the psychological aspect. And you were sort of hitting the head in the nail, because you're saying that you feel more relaxed. You feel like you have more options. You have less restrictions, because it gives you more variety. You still have the feeling that you can have certain things that taste good, even if you're in a dieting phase or in a very small calorie budget. So you can still accommodate for things that taste good, and you can potentially add more volume in your diet without adding calories. So one of the things that allows or helps adding some things that are low calorie and also add some extra sweetness is that you can still manage cravings, help with your sweet tooth, or even that feeling that you can still have certain things that are enjoyable, that are sweet, certain desserts that are low calories, and still being able to achieve your goals if it's fat loss or weight maintenance.
Sugar-free jelly, I think, would have to be one of the best little inventions ever when dieting. I know that's definitely something we like to incorporate with our clients, and sort of, I guess, rather than saying like you can't have these foods, swapping things. So just making little tweaks and swapping things for lower calorie options, you can really have more food or decrease your calories, but you're still actually eating foods that you enjoy. You're definitely not limiting yourself to vegetables and meat.
Taking, for example, when you're eating vegetables, you sort of, I'm a person who likes to add some sweetness with my vegetables. Like,
Really?
I don't know, it's like I combine savory, like soy sauce, for example, and I combine it with a little bit of Splenda, for example, and that makes it a sweet dressing.
I've
But
never
it's
heard of
obviously,
that.
yeah, I'm weird. I'm sorry, but I have to tell that I'm weird. But I used to have like teriyaki sauce.
Yeah.
But the teriyaki sauce is sort of sweet, but it also has a lot of calories.
Yeah.
For the most part. So I was like, what can I have that is still savory and is sort of sweet as well, that can allow me to enjoy my vegetables a little bit more. I can't eat plain vegetables. That's one of my. I'm a dietitian, but I can't eat just like plain spinach, or I could just not do that. So what I do is I either have like honey mustard, but I combine the mustard with a little bit of a Splenda, and when I mix them together is sort of sweet mustard.
Yeah.
Or what I do, if it's not that, I will combine the Splenda and the soy sauce, and that makes a sweet sauce.
I feel like I'm
Still
going to
a
have
little
to try this
savory.
now. It sounds so interesting.
It is so good, and it just helps you to sort of add some sort of savory and sweet together, and that tastes good with just your vegetables. So I don't know, I'm a sweet tooth, but a savory tooth as well. So combining these two together helps me to enjoy my vegetables, and I can eat heaps more when I have that option that just plain vegetables.
Well, I think the main, I guess, takeaway from that is you're eating your vegetables. Whereas if you weren't sort of doing your addition, it's sort of a task and you don't really want to do it. But if you can make healthy eating enjoyable, then I think that's definitely a win.
Absolutely. And I see that with all my clients as well. Sometimes they feel like going into a dieting phase or just trying to change some habits or behaviors will mean that they have to stop eating the things they like, or feeling like their diet will be very restrictive, or they have to avoid completely certain things. And that's the benefit of having these options that are very low calories and still provide you with some sweetness, and they are safe. So
yeah,
what else can you ask if they're safe, and you can also maintain your cravings down because you're allowing things in your diet that still provide you with some pleasure, you still are still enjoyable, and they can allow you to have more variety. So what else can you ask for?
yeah. And I think as well, like I'm sure there probably is going to continue to be more and more things that do sort of come out as they do more and more studies. But with the information we have right now, if you're looking at the risks of having artificial sweeteners versus the actual known risks of obesity and being overweight, then it's sort of, from what we know at the moment, like your better option is going to be obviously creating that healthier body fat range, and I guess fighting the obesity. And then, yeah, until we know more, I suppose there isn't really anything that I've seen really that's come out too much, talking to especially like the gut health aspect of the sweeteners. So I know that that's another thing that people do mention, that you mentioned earlier, is that people are worried that it destroys your gut health.
I guess people are very skeptical because there have been few studies, but this study had been on mice, and most of the studies with mice, what happens is that they have given the mice a very large amount that usually a human wouldn't have, that amount, that exorbitant amount of artificial sweetener in one seat. So obviously, if they do that consistently on mice with this extremely large amount of artificial sweeteners, and that's not realistically something that someone normal in life would do, you would see that obviously that's going to have an impact because you're having an excessive amount of it. And that comes back to how much is realistically possible for someone normal to have. Like, to have a negative effect, especially when we look at the safe levels of each artificial sweetener, you would probably need to have, especially if we refer to aspartame and sucralose, that are the most common ones utilized nowadays, you would need to have, for example, if I give you something to sort of have an idea, you would have to have 31 to 35 cans of Diet Coke a day, every day, for the rest of your life, to actually have a negative effect in your health, in your gut health. And also, you gotta bring back to the idea that all these studies don't look just they just look at the artificial sweetener by itself, but they don't look at the whole lifestyle. So if you're someone who eats your vegetables, you eat a high protein diet, you exercise, you sleep well, you manage your stress, all of those factors are going to be much more impactful than just looking at the one thing that we need to blame to sort of, we need to scrape that from your diet because this is the thing that is causing you to have a poor gut health. And that's not necessarily the truth.
I suppose moderation is sort of key with anything like that. It's like saying, you know, if you're having 35 cans of alcohol a day, like, and yet people still very comfortably binge drink on weekends, and alcohol is something that, especially in Australia, is very readily accepted as normal to drink it, even knowing there is a lot of studies on the effects of alcohol, and that doesn't really seem to stop us. So it's kind of, I guess, a little bit ironic that people that will happily drink a lot of alcohol, but then they have issues with diet soft drink and artificial sweeteners, thinking that that's going to be damaging for their health.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So that's what I think the problem is that people are looking to the one thing they can blame, but they are not looking at the whole history of the person, the background, the lifestyle, what their diet looks like. So you can do a bigger, you have the bigger picture and have a better assessment on what are the actual risks. Because if you look at what the odds are for someone who exercise, manage their stress, sleeps well, eats well, the risks are very minimal. Whereas if you look at someone who perhaps they only have Diet Coke, but they don't sleep well, they smoke, they don't exercise, their diet is very poor, they have takeaways all the time, the odds are much higher, but not necessarily because the Diet Coke is going to cause the problem. It's probably going to be a small contributor to the increase of inflammation or changes in your microbiome in your gut. But it's not the only one thing that we need to blame. Is looking at the big picture.
So if you're making healthy choices surrounding that, having artificial sweeteners is definitely not going to be the end of the world. So if you are trying to control calories, then it is a good option to be able to still have the balance, the flexibility, and some sweetness while you're dieting.
And I would say there is only a small risk for certain people to have like gastric discomfort or bloating or a little bit of gas, just because some people don't tolerate or they just not able to digest, break down these chemicals. And that's what you will hear from some people, that they don't go well with artificial sweeteners.
Yeah.
So that could happen. And there's another camp of artificial sweeteners that are a little bit more like lower calorie options, but they are potentially more more likely to have certain level of digestion. So that's where like sugar alcohols come into place. So I guess you've heard about glycerol or uh, maltitol or this other one, like I don't know, that every sugar that you can find at the end that ends in ol, that will be a sugar alcohol. And these ones can be fermented in your gut and not being able to be digested well.
Yeah.
And this is one of the potential type of sweeteners that could potentially bring some level of discomfort. So some people might feel like if they add that to their diet, they could potentially respond not very well.
I suppose that's like anything. Not everyone can digest everything the same. Like you've got people with gluten and lactose. Like not everyone can digest everything. So yeah, there's no point demonizing the entire group just because a couple of people don't digest it properly. So that makes sense.
And I think at the end of the day, for those people, you would just recommend, well, try maybe stevia if it's something that you might be able to tolerate. If you don't tolerate that, maybe you can have a little bit of normal sugar, and that's not going to kill you anyways.
Yeah.
But you might need to sort of accommodate a little bit more your carbohydrates and your total calories, so you don't sort of go overboard with that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's just an extra tool that you can either use or not use. And because there are so many varieties of artificial sweeteners, there will be potentially one option that is going to feel good for you.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I think, and it is something obviously that is totally personal preference, but I think it's good for people to know that they do have the options and they can choose, and that it's not going to give them cancer or all of these sort of crazy things that are out there, that it is actually quite safe in moderation.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, for someone who can be at risk, if individuals that have this rare metabolic disorder that's called phenylketonuria, or have you heard about that? Like PKU?
No.
So these people cannot metabolize the amino acids like
Oh, is this the people that have to eat
phenylalanine.
really low protein because they can't
Yeah,
metabolize?
so they have to avoid a specific amino acid that they are not able to metabolize, and if they eat things with this phenylalanine, which is part of the structure of aspartame, they can actually have really bad. They will struggle, and they might be at risk of having a really allergic reaction to it. So that's the only thing that you would say you should be careful about aspartame.
Yeah.
But maybe sucralose in these individuals have no problems. So it's just being aware of, if you have that condition, you might be able to get away with other type of artificial sweetener that don't contain phenylalanine. But that's it.
Yeah, no, we've actually got a friend, and their little girl has it, which is the only reason why I've heard of it before, because I just know she's got to have a very particular diet. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm assuming though, like I don't know if it's something that's been able to be tested for a very long time, or if it's something that's sort of a newer thing, because she's only about 4, I think, and they've found out obviously her like when she was a baby. But yeah, it is crazy the different things they can test for these days.
Yeah, that's a condition that it generally tends to appear in very young age. And it is something that the patient will show symptoms of allergies, specifically to foods that contain this protein. So you can easily do a blood test and identify whether there's a allergic reaction to certain chemicals. And you will be able to find in your blood tests what sort of indicators might be telling you that you have PKU. So that's the way you discover it.
Oh, that's so interesting. There you go. Learn something new. Well, It is late, guys. We are doing this podcast at 10 o'clock at night. So I will let you go, but I do love to ask, if you could leave one piece of wisdom with the world, what would it be?
I think I love to say to everyone and love to my clients is that learn how to live your life by learning, loving, laughing, and living, like actually living, not just focusing on going through life with no focusing on what really matters. So live, love, laugh, and learn. Yeah.
I love that. That's so great. So everyone that wants to find you, follow you, do you just want to drop your handles in so people know where to follow you?
Yeah, sure. So anti-diet_dietitian. That's my Instagram. Most of the time, people will find me there, and I have all the links to somewhere other places. For example, they can get my website or links to my YouTube channel, which is the same name. And yeah, but basically, my Instagram is where I do most of the content, and I'm there all the time.
Definitely check it out, guys. She has an incredible feed. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast with you. And I'm excited for this one to come out. I think people are going to find it really, really interesting.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and it was really cool. I enjoyed doing that and talking about this because it's definitely a topic that I'm always sort of pushing to sort of clear up, and this is the best way to sort of finally a time where I was able to put all the information I knew and speak it out loud. So
It's definitely
that's
my
great.
favorite thing about social media is it's such a tool and platform these days to be able to push information, which I love. It's moved away from just being selfies and now it's actually a learning tool. So it's good.
Absolutely.